Have meetings. They'd decide who the rich people were and go through them in alphabetical order. 2 cows from you, they'd say. 1 cow from you. Half a cow from you. Get together with him and his half, and that makes a whole cow. They tell them, if you don't hand over the meat, then you'll be put on trial. So they always gave in the end, even if they were down to their last cow.
The Kazakhs resisted. They destroyed their herds. Millions of the animals requisitioned by the state died of neglect. The government's grain-producing plans were a disaster. They were soon abandoned. But it was too late for the Kazakhs. A quarter of the Kazakh nation starved to death.
The NKVD's headquarters were here. Every day its officials would go around searching for food. They'd search one man, then another. Whatever they found, grain or anything, they confiscated. Times were bad for the poor as well as the rich. Like a hen being plucked, the Kazakhs were disintegrating.
The corpses we saw, they weren't Kazakhs from our town. They'd come in from the countryside, hitched a ride or walked here in the hope of finding food in the capital. They all died anyway.
In Moscow, celebrations of Soviet health and efficiency masked the real price of progress. Stalin did not pause to count the cost.
Когда веселее живется, работа спорится. Если бы у нас был кризис, если бы у нас была безработица, бич рабочего класса, если бы у нас было нищенство, если бы наша продукция не росла, если бы у рабочих и крестьян нашей страны не было такого хорошего правительства, которое заботится о них и считается с их нуждами. Словом, если бы жилось плохо и не весело, то никакого большевистского движения у нас не было бы, заверяю вас, не было.
In the hold of a ship, a mini bulldozer is busy, moored in the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk, bringing maize from New Orleans, now at the height of Russia's harvest. 1 in 7 of the trains available for grain in this region is tied up with imported produce. The port's director blames the men from the ministry in Moscow for not predicting the rich Russian harvest. Central planning, the legacy of Lenin, still dominating the country. For the Soviet crop, transport is unpredictable. There's too much waste, too little grain getting this far to the storage silos. The harvest should be a record, but could be a catastrophe. The head of the depot agrees with the port director that the transport ministry is to blame. This is farming on a huge scale. 73 years after the Russian Revolution, they still can't feed their own people, despite the fertile land. David Loyne, BBC News, in the Kuban region of Russia.
Fighting between rival...
Now Robert Conquest estimates that 20 million were victims of Stalinism in Red Empire.
Mexico, 1940. 11 years had passed since Trotsky's expulsion from the Soviet Union, yet the founder of the Red Army had not softened. He said, "I shall remain a revolutionist till the day I die." That day came in August 1940. A Soviet secret agent bludgeoned Trotsky with an ice axe. Barely alive, Trotsky reached hospital where the doctors could not save him. His assassin was caught, but the man who had ordered Trotsky's death was far away, in Moscow. Stalin had claimed his most illustrious victim. Trotsky was one of millions killed as Stalin purged party and people of opposition to his rule.
I've been studying the purges for a long time. By my calculations, 20 million people died in Stalin's Great Terror. This celebrated observatory in Leningrad used to be the capital of the astronomical world until the 1930s. Astronomers here were accused of taking an un-Marxist line on sunspots and purged. Stamp collectors, weather forecasters, students of Esperanto suffered the same fate. Anyone at all might find himself in Stalin's firing line.
In 1989, this funeral service was broadcast by the television station at Chelyabinsk in Siberia. Thousands of bodies of people killed in the Great Terror had been discovered in a mass grave outside the town. This woman tells the Soviet reporter that she hopes to discover the fate of her parents, arrested in 1937. She says she and her brother were left to fend for themselves. Another says, "I am the daughter and granddaughter of enemies of the people. I have never known where my grandfather is buried. I am the last member of my family who remembers him. Now I hope that he will rest in peace."
Сегодня по всей стране земля открывает могилы. Мы все...
Nobel Prize winner Andrei Sakharov was there to offer moral support. For years, he had worked to expose the crimes of the 1930s. He says this mass grave at Chelyabinsk is one of many that have come to light in the Soviet Union. Each exhumation comes as a shock, even to those who knew of the grave's existence. A few did know the secret of Chelyabinsk. Yuri Gerasimov was one. He stumbled across the bodies in 1947 while exploring an old mine.
I went along the tunnel looking around. I'd gone about 6 or 7 meters when it turned off to the right. I took a few more steps and then there it was, right in front of me. A mass of dead bodies, bones, flesh, skulls, clothes all mixed up together, just lying there rotting. Being down there must have preserved them. They'd lain there for 10 years, but we'd opened the shaft and let in the oxygen, so they'd begun to decompose and were sort of shifting around. I don't remember how I got out of there. My friend Pavlik helped me up the last bit. What's up, he asked. All those dead people, corpses. Oh, them, he said. They're those enemies of the people.
The bodies were transported by lorry. One night, Mikhail Moseyev decided to hitch a lift.
When I jumped down into the back of the lorry, I fell onto something soft, dead bodies. Their legs were sticking out, naked legs. You could see the soles of their feet and their calves as well. They weren't dangling, but stiff, stuck straight out. So I knew they were dead. I got scared, so I jumped off the lorry. And that was that.
When the grave was opened in 1989, a team of archaeologists volunteered to excavate part of the site known as the Golden Hills. Amidst the bones lay touching clues to the identities of the people buried there.
We found felt boots laced up with straw. They were peasant boots. We found a lot of spectacles, which the intelligentsia used to wear at the time. So we knew the people lying there represented a cross-section of society. They were of different ages, too. We even found some children's boots. Altogether, we uncovered about 400 skeletons. They were in layers. So one group of people had been shot, covered over with about 2 feet of earth, and then the next group was shot. We opened up only 2 of these layers. There were more than 200 bodies in each.
At the Forensic Center in Chelyabinsk, police scientists are analyzing the bones. They hope to discover the age and sex of the victims and determine how they died.
All these remains have been investigated in great detail. Here's one of the skulls we've been looking at. It has a bullet wound. Here's the entry point and then the exit point. This means they were shot through the side of the head, like this. We've found that most of these skulls belong to young people. Their teeth are in good condition, and there's other evidence which indicates that generally they were between 18 and 30 years old.
The people of Chelyabinsk reburied a few of the bones dug from the Golden Hills. But none of the mourners will know for sure whether their loved ones lie buried here. January 1934, the 17th Party Congress opened with celebrations. The first 5-year plan had been successfully completed. The party leaders helped to create the festive mood. One of the rising political stars was Sergei Kirov. At the Congress, delegates were to vote for a new central committee. Stalin was expected to come top of the poll.
I remember sitting there with my hands poised, ready to start clapping his name. But it wasn't his name they announced. It was a different name. I don't remember exactly who. Kirov, Voroshilov, or Kalinin. One of those three. But it wasn't Stalin. It shocked me so much that I remembered it for a long time afterwards. It was so strange. How could they not have chosen Stalin? And the second name they announced wasn't Stalin either. I think he came about 9th or 10th. I don't remember exactly. There was this sense of fear. Maybe it wasn't fear. It's difficult now to describe how we felt, but it took a hold on all of us, even me.
The vote was a turning point in Stalin's relationship with the party. He feared other leaders threatened his power. None more so than the man on the right being silenced, the Leningrad party chief, Sergei Kirov. Kirov worked in the Leningrad party headquarters, the Smolny Institute. 10 months after the party congress, an assassin walked into the building. His name was Leonid Nikolaev.
Nikolaev hid in here, waiting for Kirov to return to his office. He slipped out, shot him, and fainted beside the body. He confessed to the crime. Over the next few months, so did 500 others. Eventually, a quarter of the population of Leningrad were arrested in connection with the Kirov murder. It became the keystone of the edifice of repression which Stalin constructed to preserve his power.
Stalin presided over Kirov's funeral. Nobody knows for sure whether he ordered the murder, but he quickly turned it to his advantage. Under a new law, oppositionists could be arrested, tried, and summarily executed. In public, Stalin moved cautiously. He waited a year and a half before mounting the first of a new series of show trials. In August 1936, 2 of his oldest colleagues, fellow Bolsheviks, were charged with terrorist crimes.
Moscow, capital of Soviet Russia, is the scene of another dramatic trial in which world interest is being taken. It is alleged that Trotsky, the unseen prisoner in the dock, at present living in Norway, is the mastermind behind a great plot to smash up the Soviet regime by methods of terrorism.
The Moscow party chief, Lev Kamenev, confessed to the charges. So too did Grigory Zinoviev, once Leningrad party boss. The men who had run the greatest cities of the empire were reduced in court to confessing their guilt to preposterous crimes. When the trial ended, they were sentenced to death and shot that very day. This trial was only the first. Trotsky, in exile, listened to the radio reports with mounting horror.
Stalin's trial against me is built upon false confessions extorted by modern inquisitorial method in the interest of the ruling clique. There are no crime in history more terrible in intention or execution than the Moscow trials of Zinoviev Kamenev and Radek Petakov.
Ambitious party officials were quick to step into the dead men's shoes. Stalin made one Moscow party chief. His name, Nikita Khrushchev.
Товарищ, троцкисты зиновьевцы, которые являются прямыми врагами рабочего класса трудящихся докатились до того, что они объединились с фашистами, объединились со всей нечистью, которая злобствует против первого советского государства, где господствует труд, где господствует рабочий класс вместе со всем трудовым народом нашего Советского Союза.
Stalin was consolidating his power, surrounded by men who owed him allegiance, but there were more old Bolsheviks to be disposed of. Natalia Rykova's father was denounced at the Kamenev-Zinoviev trial. Natalia feared the worst. She asked her mother what would happen.
And so I asked her straight out, Mama, does that mean they're really going to shoot father? She lowered her eyes and said, of course. So then I summoned up the courage to ask, and us too? Shoot us? I don't know, she said. But the fact that father was to be shot was clear from the start.
Rykov seemed doomed. But his wife thought he should make one final appeal. She saw hope in a letter another purge victim had written to Stalin.
When my mother had read the letter, she turned to him and said, we should have done just the same. We should have denied all the accusations against us, too. And then he did the strangest thing. He turned to her, his face had changed. It was grey, unrecognizable. There was rebuke in his eyes. And he said, surely you've understood by now that it's all useless. It's hopeless, pointless. The whole thing would be useless.
No one felt safe from the purges. Even government ministers like Foreign Commissar Maxim Litvinov waited for the midnight knock on the door.
He never went to bed without a revolver under his pillow. And there was arrangement between him and my mother that if they came to the door, she'd give a special knock on his door, and he'd shoot himself because he didn't want the humiliation and all that. We used to play bridge into the small hours. Somewhere after 2 or 3, we decided they're not coming tonight, because he hated the idea of being found in his pajamas and raked out of bed.
Litvinov survived. But in the 1930s, virtually every member of Lenin's first revolutionary government was picked off by Stalin.
People were being arrested right and left. There, people were being swept away in the frenzy, in the hunt for enemies of the people. I myself, being a foreigner then, it was dangerous. Like every other Russian, I too had to sleep with my clothes on, because any night they would come for you. It was terrible. People wouldn't laugh on the street. Everybody was sulky. People were walking like ghosts because of the fear. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring. They couldn't bank on tomorrow because maybe they wouldn't be alive or be there.
The citizens of Leningrad were a particular target. Stalin purged them ruthlessly in case another Kirov arose to threaten his power base in Moscow. In the summer of 1937, the beautiful northern capital played host to a record number of tourists. In secret, the terror was reaching its height.
I came to Leningrad in the summer of 1937. It was a particularly beautiful summer. Along with the other tourists, I came here to the Peter Paul Fortress to see the old Tsarist prison cells. It's still a great tourist attraction, but as we walked round here in 1937, we thought this was a relic of the dead past. Little did we realize that there were 5 modern prisons in Leningrad, crammed with 30,000 enemies of the state, who would have been grateful for this comparative luxury.
In the Kresty prison, 16 people shared a cell built to house just one person. They were often sent to jail after first being denounced by workmates. She says, bandits are plotting to take away from the world's workers our most dear and beloved Stalin. She demands no mercy must be shown to the enemy. They should be shot.
During the meeting, we were forced to vote for the death of this man who was standing with 2 guards. And I voted, like everybody else. Everybody put up their hand, so I voted for him. I don't know who he is, I don't know what he did, but I voted because that was the situation. If you didn't put up your hand, you would be arrested.
A word out of place could bring death or imprisonment. In the Kremlin, Augusta Karlovich had to be especially careful.
People were afraid of prison, afraid to speak. And so when they were arrested, they informed on each other. I remember once, a group of us used to get together, sit round and play cards. Well, someone told a joke about the government. It turned out there was an informer there, a Stalinist. Well, he informed on him. And the man, the engineer, he got 10 years hard labour on the Volga Canal.
Youth organizations like the Young Pioneers encouraged children to inform on their parents. A 14-year-old from the Urals was held up as a model. Pavlik Morozov had denounced his father for doing business with enemies of the people. Father was shot. Pavlik was murdered by members of his family. But Pavlik's heroic deeds inspired witnesses like this young boy, Nikitin. Even today, the pioneers still honor Pavlik Morozov.
The state penetrated the heart of family life. This was a world where children were trained to thank Stalin for their happy childhood. The new moral code demanded that everyone put loyalty to party and state first. As a result, everyone lived in fear.
People soon learned the drill. After denunciation came arrest. One night, Tatiana Gomolitskaya saw her mother taken away.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a ring of the bell that I thought, oh, another search, all right. And it took a very long time. I think at about 7:30 they finished. And then he said, well, get ready to go, to my mother. And then I asked him, what can she take with her? And I gathered all the things that she may need And he left with her. And I just fell down on my knees and started crying and said, "Oh God, why don't I believe in you?" Because it was the only being who could help me. Nobody could help me.
In every city, the same routine was followed. Arrested prisoners were interrogated. At Kiev in the Ukraine, they were taken to the October Palace. Then, as now, it was outwardly a place of culture. Beneath the stage lay the secret police headquarters and the cells.
Когда я вошел в подвал, я поразился.
When I entered the basement, I couldn't believe my eyes. Everywhere along the walls were small, narrow cupboards, and they'd been specially constructed so you couldn't sit in them or stand properly. You had to sort of crouch.
Это было продумано специально для того, чтобы
Those little cupboards had been specially thought out to torment people, so that after a certain time in them, when we were taken to the interrogator, we would already be completely broken.
чтобы они уже были совершенно изможденными.
In a cell deep in the building, methods had been devised to persuade Vikenty Grochowski to admit to all charges.
В этой комнате стоит 4 стола, и на этих
In the room there were 4 tables. There were people lying on the tables. Well, I don't even know if you'd call them people. They were completely covered in blood. They were being beaten with sticks. Their flesh was raw. Blood was dripping onto the floor. This was the torture room. The guard said to me, "Had a look. Well, if you don't want to end up here, you'll have to sign."
Trucks took bodies from the October Palace. On their way back, they stopped at the waterside.
We parked the truck next to the lake. This one here, the Telbin. We opened up the back and pulled out the tarpaulin. I had a look in the back of the truck and saw that it was covered in blood, thick, half-dried blood. I was shocked. I looked at Misha. "What's up?" he said. "I told you I'd drive enemies of the people." And he added, "But not live ones, dead ones. And I'm not the only one who does it. Lots of us do."
Я не только один вожу, нас много возить.
These woods near Kiev are one huge graveyard, for the purges were especially savage here. In the midst of the terror, a new constitution was proclaimed. It promised all the nationalities of the Soviet Union new liberties. It guaranteed freedom of speech. It recognized the right to demonstrate. It promised every Soviet citizen protection from arbitrary arrest. A coal mine at Vorkuta in the Arctic Circle. These miners earn 3 times as much as the average Soviet worker. But in the 1930s, this was a slave labor camp for enemies of the people. Today's miners travel to the coalface by train. Then, it was a 2-hour trek on foot. There were no machines for cutting coal. The prisoners used a pick or a piece of wood. Many had nothing but their own bare hands. The Vorkuta mines were part of the Gulag, a network of forced labor camps built in the harshest places in Stalin's empire. At Vorkuta, temperatures of -50 centigrade are common. In the 1930s, the only access was by river from Archangel, 1,500 miles away. Where the modern town now stands, the prisoners lived in wooden barracks. Ilya Ilyin was one of them.
The food was awful, and the working conditions were terrible. There was no health or safety precautions down the mine. We were dressed in rags and had no medical help. People started to get ill, but nobody took any notice. So they fell ill and got more ill until they faded away to nothing. They were goners. I don't know about the other camps, but in ours up to 21 people died a day. They dug trenches in preparation for the burials in rows of 3 or 4.
Рыли траншеи заранее по 3-4 ряда.
They just threw the dead prisoners in, stripped of everything. They didn't even bother to give them name tags.
Ничего там, бирки не ложили, я наблюдал.
I saw them doing it once. There was no bulldozer, so they just threw them in by the legs. How they fell, head first or legs first, nobody cared. And when they'd filled the trenches with bodies, they covered them over. And that was that. Now they've put up big buildings over those places, over those trenches.
Много стоит зданий.
The first labor camps opened in the 1920s. The economy soon came to depend on them. Slaves could do dangerous work like logging that few others would tackle. The propaganda films showed honest toil to rehabilitate unfortunate criminals. Prisoners opened up areas where natural resources were rich but expensive to exploit. They had to build the labor camps themselves. Flora Liebman was brought to the Soviet Union from Scotland by her mother. She married a Soviet citizen, but was arrested and sent to the camps in 1937.
The camps were dugouts, and the top was rounded up with earth like a grave, and a few steps out of earth you get into there. There was nothing on the floor, nothing. We slept in our clothes on the earth, on Mother Earth. Nothing. Cold, shivering, suffering, memories, and oh gosh, I don't know how people lived through that.
At Karaganda in Central Asia, Flora worked in a camp hospital preparing bodies for autopsies.
There was a built-in iron stove, and that was the usual Russian style. And we would put these corpses around the stove, standing up on the stove. I remember one day I came in to see how they were getting on, and they were defreezing, and one of the corpses started moving. I got so scared, and I ran away, and I left the door open, which I got a reprieve because we had to warm them up again. A cart would come up with an old horse, and on this cart we would pick up these corpses, naked corpses, and put them on the sledges like logs. And off we'd go to the burial place, and that was just pits that we were digging in the summer. These were the pits where we buried the corpses. We just threw them in there. I would stand looking at these and think to myself, oh my God, these were human beings. They had families, they were living. Somebody's crying, thinking where he or she was. And here I am, just pushing them into these pits.
The camp hospital in Vorkuta still stands. Athanasis Venaris worked there.
We were slaves in the true sense of the word. We held on to the belief that justice would come. So we were optimists. We tried to keep each other going, and we were all still individuals. We always managed to have interesting conversations, even about the terrible things happening to us. We used to dream of eating well. That kept us going. I would dream that I was in a cake shop where I would try and eat as much as I could so I wouldn't be hungry when I woke up. I'm content. You have to accept your fate. At least I'm alive. Many of my friends are dead. I survived thanks to the hospital and thanks to good and kind people. They taught me that I'm a human being.
The man who ran the camps from 1936 was Nikolai Yezhov. His was the public face of the Great Terror. Yezhov was head of the secret police, the NKVD. Stalin stayed in the background. Many believed that he knew nothing of the terror. Yet he signed death warrants for thousands every day. At the 20th anniversary of the secret police in 1937, Anastas Mikoyan praised Yezhov.
Можем прямо сказать, НКВД своей разобщительной работой раскрытие средств организации не только спас много жизней, которым угрожала опасность от врагов, шпионов, диверсантов, разведчиков, от крушений поездов, которые они организовывали, отравлений народных масс, столовых, водой там и всеми другими адскими мерами борьбы с народом. Заражение скота эпизодиями, всякими болезнями, заражение людей. Вот в этой борьбе под руководством замечательного большевика сталинского наркома Ежова.
Like all Soviet workers, the secret police had to keep to a plan. Stalin expected them to fulfill their quotas. In Georgia, NKVD archivist Georgy Tsialidze asked his boss how well they were doing.
I asked him, Christopher Sergeyevich, I said, listen here. We could both die tomorrow, so tell me honestly, how many people were executed in Georgia? I can tell you, he said, 80,000. That's what he told me. And then he added, ironically, because he wasn't in favor of it all either, we overfulfilled our plan.
Tsialidze stayed with the NKVD.
We were living a lie. I knew that, and I personally suffered because of it. My wife would say, What's the point in staying? Give the job up. But you couldn't just give it up. If you did, you'd be arrested. Once in there, there was no way out. But she'd say, "You're always coming home."